What do you get when you take a well-thought-out, intricately textured sci-fi universe, an interesting character, add the director of Empire Strikes Back, and the writer of The Dark Knight Returns? Somehow, beyond comprehension, a shockingly bad pile of sequel shit.
I review movie previews.
What's up, movie world? Our journey through the Robocop trilogy continues with this in-depth movie night analysis of Robocop 2. What should have been an enriching, challenging, exciting, and satisfying continuation of the Paul Verhoeven classic is instead a mismatch of PG-13 cowardice and H-Wood box office greedy short-sightedness. While it would be easy to turn this commentary into a cinematic roast, let's make our 120 minutes of movie suffering count for something. Let's learn from Robocop 2's mistakes, gain a little movie wisdom, and hopefully avoid the same fate in the future. Our main focus is going to be asking what went wrong and why. What were the choices made? What could have been different? How did a concept that was leading towards greatness somehow get buried in an emotionless, logic-free screenplay? So cue up your copy of Robocop 2. Remember, I'll be mentioning the time code around every 5 minutes so we can stay in sync. There may be silent pauses lasting 10 to 30 to 60 seconds. Don't worry, there's nothing wrong with the audio of this video. It's just me taking a moment to gather some thoughts. And there are a lot of them, because this could have been a truly great film. Let's press play and start the search for Robocop 2's movie truth in 3, 2, 1. It's my hunch that the Robocop remake due next year will have a lot of the problems that this sequel had. Aside from the obvious structure of retelling the origins of Robocop, the major issue of this second film is the journey of the character. We end the first film with the chief of OCP asking Robocop what his name is, and he says Murphy. Boom. End of the movie. The meaning being that he accepts his humanity, he remembers it, he identifies more with it than the machine that he's become. So going into a sequel, which is 3 years later, we do not have the original writers of the first film, so we are losing the inspiration that came about from that original. There's always a lot more energy when people have something to prove. Funny commercial opens up the sequel here. The original opened up with the newscast and then went into a commercial. Here we're going to have the reverse, where it's the commercial first. Magnavolt security system, lethal response. We live in a society where killing the would-be thief of a car is acceptable. Corporation can market that. So again, human life is not really valued all that high. The set for the newscasters is much bigger. We do get the same newscasters. Everyone has returned for this sequel. All the major players are back. Peter Weller will step down after this part because he's disappointed with how it turns out. It doesn't focus enough on the character of Murphy. And because sitting inside of the suit for all the filming becomes too much. This cuts right to the notion that there is a new plague, a new scourge on the city of Detroit, being Nuke. Nuke is the drug of choice. It's a very cool name. I like it a lot. And it was the brainchild of writer Frank Miller, who gained popularity within the comic book world first, having, of course, written The Dark Knight Returns, which in a lot of ways that changed the way that comics were written from that point on. Being the late 80s. We get a glimpse here of Kane, the new bad guy that we're going to have to worry about in this movie. Before it was Dick Jones and Clarence Boddicker, and now it's Kane, an almost messiah, twisted, God on earth kind of figure This is 1990, and we don't have the David Koresh thing happen just yet. That's a few years later with the Branch Davidians in Waco, Texas. But there's kind of a similar sort of vibe going on here. This actually does have a Frank Miller-esque sort of comic book influence going on to it, where The Dark Knight Returns has those mutant characters, the gang, and this is a bleaker Detroit on the one hand, but there's something with the cinematography here that's a little bit too bright. It's a little bit too crisp, and the cinematography in the original Robocop made it a little dirtier. There was this sort of seediness to it, and here it's a little bit too, I don't know, it's too sharp. And it's a little bit too comical in terms of its tone. We get the bag lady who has her cart of recyclable cans. She gets robbed by a guy who seems to want to help her. As he's counting the money, he gets robbed by 2 prostitutes. So it's everyone for themselves, and she stabs him with the heel in the face, and we get the blood going on. The tone really shifts here in the second Robocop. The first one stuck to a dramatic core. It played it serious for the most part, and any kind of comedy and little over-the-top sort of wink-wink was within the newscast and the commercials. But here, everything in the movie is going to have this tone to it. It's a little bit too, not self-aware, but it's just taking things a little bit too lightly. And the characters within this universe, within the world, are just too cartoony. You don't really get the sense that they're real people. And it's almost like we're getting a greatest hits right off the bat of everything that worked in the first Robocop. We get the commercial, we get the newscast, we get the violence, we get the people just kind of selling each other out and survival of the fittest. It's all about just no more societal rules. We're all just animals again. This guy says he wants the bolts for the gun, and the guy is like third drawer. He doesn't even look at the gun. He's been beat up in the face. 5 minutes, 30 seconds, and they're just going through looking at all the weapons. This is just like a knockoff, poor man's version of the Clarence Boddicker group of killers in the first movie. This guy here that gets the bazooka, he almost looks like the guy in the grocery store in the first film that kept saying, "F me." It's like, what, are all these people on nuke? I guess this is what nuke makes you do. It just kind of, it's like ecstasy plus crack or something, where like you want to touch things and just, oh, like look at the light, or I don't know what's going on with this guy. They're all a little bit too cliche in terms of their bad guy-ishness. Everyone in the original film at least had this kind of level of quality, even when they were kind of one-noted. I'll take anybody in that original gang over any character in this film. We get the explosions right away. It's just, okay, we're just going to go right for genre set piece off the bat. There's no rooting in what happens with the character right away. And this is a typical sort of device for any sort of action film. Now here we have the sci-fi action hybrid. What we want in a sequel is we want to see that things have moved forward. We're in the same world, same location, with the same characters. But we want to see that there's been progress. We want to see that as a result of all the dramatic struggle of the first film, things have happened and moved forward. Now, whether that's progress or regression, whether Detroit's become a better place to live or a more dangerous place, obviously more dangerous. This is a nice iconic image. 7 minutes, 10 seconds. The low angle shot as Robocop's foot comes out of the door open, the foot hits the pavement, and then we slowly start to track up, and Robocop gets out of the car. Now we do get the blood and gore of the Verhoeven style. Robocop just starts wasting everybody. But as a character, it's really interesting. He's kind of back to where he was in the first film. Think it over, creep. Police officer. So we're getting the one-liners again. We're getting the whipping with the finger, putting the gun into the leg, again, which is a nice creative place to store the gun. But as a character, as Robocop is Murphy, he should really be Murphy. This is really Murphy's journey. So if he leaves the first movie, it ends with the mask off of his face. So now thinking As a character, would he want to keep that? Would he want to get rid of the visor and maybe just cover up the forehead or a little bit above the forehead? Would he want more of his face visible? What would the compromise be? What would he, as a person who now remembers his humanity, what would he want to be doing? This just feels like we're back in the middle of, okay, we get the prime directives again to serve the public, protect the innocent, uphold the law, no surprise directives popping up. I guess black lights were a thing in the late 80s and early 90s, and we see black light graffiti everywhere. 8 minutes, 45 seconds. He finds the nuke in the criminal's car, and right away he's just like, hey, where is this stuff made? I'm going off. So we're not getting any establishment of where this person is at as a character, as a human being. We're not getting a sense of what is his state of mind. And now he's going to go into action, and these actions are going to dance with and influence these inner emotions. And as a result, some change is going to take place. There's some kind of effect that we're going to feel on this character. It's been widely shared and known that Frank Miller's original script for this was more than Hollywood was willing to deal with. It was probably very comic book independent in its thinking. It was very much off the cliche path, probably to the same degree that The Dark Knight Returns was for the Batman universe. So Frank Miller probably wanted to take Robocop into a direction the studio didn't want to take because it would probably be alienating to a lot of the fans, or so they thought. Hollywood is placed based on fear, very much like the stock market, where it's fear and greed. And risk isn't something that they're really excited to take. They'd rather play a safe bet. As much information as possible to lead to the best outcome for their investment. And going with a Frank Miller script, giving him kind of carte blanche to just let his imagination go wild, taking the universe of Robocop, which is a decrepit Detroit, drugs, violence, death, guns, gangs, corporations. This is all material that could really be taken to a dark place. And I've never read Frank Miller's Robocop, which is in comic book form, but I'm assuming it's more of that than it is this kind of cartoony version of Frank Miller's idea. This has an aftertaste of Frank Miller, but it very much is Hollywood influence. I like Robocop not even turning around and the arm just blowing this guy away. 11 minutes, 15 seconds. We have the woman holding the baby. And apparently Joe Bob Briggs is in this film with his little Texas string tie. Search Joe Bob Briggs on the internet if you want to know who that is. I like Kane's demeanor as a bad guy, as a leader here. The actor here, his size is kind of overwhelming, and he does have an eccentric quality. And the ruthlessness is there. He just shoots this woman in the car who's hiding. The problem with just jumping into a story like this without anchoring what the characters care about, it just leaves you feeling empty. It leaves you feeling directionless when we want to gauge where the characters are at. Kind of how everyone feels about what's going on. That's always what's most important to any kind of storytelling. Stories have to affect us, the audience. The number one job of any kind of storytelling is to have an emotional impact on the audience that's listening or watching it, because that's the way we remember something. That's the way we get affected by things. "12 minutes, 45 seconds, we have the one of the most interesting aspects of the movie. The 12-year-old kid who's a criminal. He's got a gun, he's swearing, he's selling nuke. Definitely a Miller-inspired creation. going to his most popular work, which is The Dark Knight Returns, you have the mutants in there, and there are some young members of that gang, and they act in pretty despicable ways. So what better way to communicate that a society has just totally been corrupted than to say the youth are capable of doing such horrific, horrible things? Very creative genre kill here, genre set piece, 13 minutes, 30 seconds. The guy's got the baby hostage. Again, that's a pretty despicable thing. He's got an automatic weapon pointed at a kid, and Robocop ricochets the bullet off of the metal door and takes him out. So that's a fun, creative thing. If you're just looking for action genre set piece, Robocop steps on the nuke. 14 minutes basically of just nonstop action. Lewis shows up, helps him out, but he's pretty much just who he is, and we introduce the opponents of the film right away. Now this is interesting. Robocop stalking his family. This is really cool. We move forward with the idea of him as a person. He remembers everyone. Her name is still Murphy. It's on the mailbox. And how she looks at him, we get his perspective, his point of view. And this is going to continue for just a little bit, and then all of a sudden it's going to be dropped. She's going to show up in the police station in just a second, and they're going to have a confrontation, but it's going to be a little uneven as to where he is and how he's feeling about all this. We get these nice little moments of memories when he was married to her, tickling her feet. Great moment here, 14 minutes, 57 seconds as he looks into the mirror as he's kissing her in the bathroom. This is the stuff that we really need. We want to connect to this. And he drives off. What we need after this is him talking to Lewis. Somehow, a dramatic conflicting moment that's going to show the struggle of this. Now we have him without the mask, so we get the continuation of the end of the first film here, but we've had 15 minutes of nonstop action. Those action sequences connected to the original film. Again, this is 1990, so we don't have the ability to continuously rewatch Robocop. We do have video stores, but there is no on-demand streaming. There is cable and network television, but the chance that you're going to see Robocop on network television isn't very likely, and if you do, it's going to be heavily edited and overdubbed, so you're not going to get the full effect. Might be on cable from time to time, and you could always rent it, but you're going to be able to rent it about 6 months to a year after it comes out, and there's only a couple copies. It's always going to be out, and you can only have it for a day or two. We, the audience, aren't necessarily going to have the original fresh in our mind, and giving us these similar set pieces and action sequences is just a way to kind of refresh us, like putting the prime directives up. It reminds us, okay, here's what he's got to obey. Nowadays, we could watch it sitting in the theater before this movie starts. This is an important scene. It's a really great scene. 17 minutes. He's basically being interrogated by people from OCP. Are you human? No. Now, this would have been better at the beginning of the film. It is gripping in a way to get us leaning forward in the seats if there is an action set piece to open up an action movie. But because it's a sequel and because we've already invested with this character, understanding this before he goes into action has more impact on what happens during the action. There was the flashback to his son as he's pointing the gun at the child criminal, so we get why he wouldn't want to shoot that kid, and he mentions, well, you can't shoot me, eh? Love that the kid's swearing. Love that he's really vile. Can just imagine that in the original screenplay, the kid was even more ridiculously over the top. Just make him an adult in a kid's body. You know, make him Chucky. He just happens to be in a small form. And make him really despicable. And that was an element that was really kind of called out and people were shocked at this film for doing. But it serves a purpose. It serves to show how corrupt things have become. And there's a way to play that can really communicate a lot of things that this story is already automatically dealing with when it comes to crime in a city, corporation owning everything, and then of course the humanity and robot duality of Robocop. The effects here for the Robocop costume, it's a little bit less believable than the original film. In the original, there was something about the design that made it even more just palpable. Here you can kind of see that it's more plastic than it is metal. In the original, it really felt like a heavy, dense material. This is an important scene, 19 minutes into the film. Your husband is dead. Now the logic alarms go off in our brains. Why is he stalking her? Why is he continuously having memories of this? If he's going to finally see her face to face and tell her that the husband is dead. It's a great moment when he leans in and says, touch this face. It's just skin over metal. It's dead. It's cold. She came to see him. And this is probably the moment of the film when we start to realize, oh, this is kind of going to suck. Because in the next 5 minutes, it's going to not return to this side of the story. We're no longer going to be able to explore Murphy and his family. And that's something the first one established. And with these few scenes, back to back to back, he stalks her. He's interrogated, she shows up. That's a nice core for Murphy's next level development. This is the journey that he needs to go on. These commercials are even more over the top in the second one, where this guy shoots himself and then they zoom in on the picture of his daughter. So he didn't choose OCP, he didn't choose the correct product, and his business failed, and now he's got nothing left. So it's too comedic. It's not subtle enough. The Verhoeven satire was a little subtle. Here, it's just over the top. It's too comical. And this character here, 21 minutes, the mayor, this actor's been in other films. The way that he's played here and the way that the character's written and directed, way over the top. I don't know if they're kind of basing it on a real mayor or some kind of political figure of the time and trying to, just do a send-up of him. But this mayor is way too just... You can't take him seriously. He doesn't seem like a threat, and he doesn't seem to take anything seriously. He's way too over the top. And the revision of these characters here has also kind of put us on a weird, unstable ground. We want to come into a sequel feeling like we've known the characters from the first film. Based on their behaviors of that original, how are they moving forward now? I like the location here of this scene. 22 minutes, 30 seconds. It's just this long, marble, enormous office. You just get the sense of the power. Again, it's great environment that backs up who the people are in the movie. The drama of the scene is betrayed by the overacting and the lack of authenticity, the lack of seriousness that the topic should require. They're talking about a city that's in debt, and OCP is going to take it over. The city's defaulting, so OCP is going to own it. And it seems like the old man of OCP has become more like a Dick Jones. And then Donald, he's also become cutthroat. He's changed as a character. And there should be some kind of bridge so that we, the audience, can understand why that's happened. We need to know what their character journeys are about. Every character in a movie undergoes some kind of a journey. So we need to understand, well, why has this character become this way? We like both of these characters because they were against Dick Jones in the first film. And especially the old man, as he said, "Dick, you're fired," that really endeared him to us. And as he asked Murphy his name, you kind of sense that maybe he would hire Murphy or help him or do something for him as a character. But he's just become more of a corporate monster, this just greed-hungry owner, ruthlessly doing whatever it takes. Now, again, he is in charge of this place, so you can assume that before the events of Robocop, the reason OCP became OCP is what this guy did. So he's probably done things like this before. We're just missing a couple steps here and there just to show how he's become what he's become. Or maybe there's a missing scene here where he reveals his feelings on the events of the previous film. That continuity's missing, and we just feel like we're being betrayed. The characters are not who they were before. And it just leaves us feeling, a little bit like, okay, I don't really know what this movie's doing anymore. More than anything, here at 25 minutes, 13 seconds, the old man is attracted to this doctor who's just doing whatever she needs to do to get her project going. He becomes just a chump, someone who's getting manipulated. In the end, of course, he's the one that's the manipulator. But it just seems a little bit ridiculous, and we want characters that are really motivated beyond some kind of cliche, easy motivations. We want something that they really want based on who they are for reasons that are very personal. You could learn a thing or two from her, Johnson. We understand now, we set in motion, we get a drive out, a set up that she has a project. She's basically Bob Morton, she's basically Dick Jones, but a female version who has her own project. They're trying to continue making more Robocops by using human subjects, but it has not gone as well as the original because apparently there was something about Murphy being a good cop and who he was that makes him work well with the cybernetic part of him. That montage of the failed experiments, that was too comedic. That was too over the top. That just ruins the tone. This starts to feel like a comedy sci-fi action film. Because of that, we start to feel, well, okay, it's really not like the first one, and it's just losing us. In 27 minutes, we're already feeling like, this is not going to be as good. This is directed by Irwin Kershner, who most famously directed the best of the Star Wars movies, Empire Strikes Back. It just goes to show that no matter how proficient and how effective the directing, a bad screenplay can never be transformed into a great movie. It all comes down to the writing. It all comes down to the characters, the ideas, and the expression of that. As a director, as an actor, you can only work with what you got. And whatever's written down, if it's not up to quality, there's really no way to fix it. Empire Strikes Back was written by Lawrence Kasdan, who had his background and his training in hardcore dramatic writing. And Irwin Kershner took that material and really made it great. He takes a Frank Miller idea, which has been bastardized, transformed, rewritten, and morphed, much like the humanity of Murphy has been made into Robocop in the first film. Same thing happens to a interesting screenplay where anything that is challenging and new and different is stripped away, and we get just a product that's supposed to appeal to everyone. And ironically, of course, as happens most of the time, it's intended to make a lot of money, it's intended to become popular, and the exact opposite happens because everything that was original and human and unique has been stripped away or suppressed. Robocop returns to duty, trying to stop the nuke epidemic by searching for Hobb. That's the name of the 12-year-old ruthless killer drug dealer. He automatically finds him at this arcade. That's a fun little sign of the 90s. 1990, we get the arcade with all the great video games, which of course now arcades are making a retro comeback. It's cool to be playing old school games once again, putting quarters into the machine. But I think most of them nowadays are 21 and over, so you can have a beer and play Bad Dudes or whatever game. The crooked cop who's hooked on Nuke. Okay, that's a cool little story device. You sold us out, Officer Duffy. Robocop discovers him making deals with Kane. The way that Robocop acts is going back to that early part of the first film where he's just, I'm acting more like a robot with programs than I am with the human who discovered who he really was and sought justice against those that killed him in his human form. I didn't really learn anything from the first film, and now I'm just doing things because the studio says that in a sequel, you just have to have the same kind of set pieces with bigger and badder opponents, and more blood, and bigger explosions, and cooler robot enemies. So we had Ed 209, but this time we're gonna have Kane in an Ed 209 with a plasma screen viewer where you can see a distorted computer-generated face. Fortunately, that's how it goes. You're a rotten cop. "31 minutes, 50 seconds. The party at the arcade's broken up. Robocop is in his car, back in action, going after what he needs to get." Notice that because there hasn't been much emotional struggle in the film so far, it's kind of breezing by. And we're not really feeling much. Almost the same set piece here, 32 minutes, 15 seconds. He goes to an abandoned factory, much like he did in the first film, and much like what happened to him in the first film, where in his human form, he was destroyed and dismembered and killed. The same fate is going to befall him in an abandoned factory. This makes us tired. This makes us think, okay, been there, done that. How is this really different from the first film? And we are never ever going to see anything else dealing with his family for the rest of the film. We had a series of 3 scenes that were pretty promising and led to some interesting inner struggle and turmoil for him. But as soon as he says to the wife, "Your husband's dead," and she gets in the car, boom, we forget about it. Because now we return to the exterior journey. We return to the objective for Robocop. And we don't have any thematic growth for him. If there's a sequel where we're going to follow a main character like this, we have to continue some kind of inner journey. Now, there are examples of films where that doesn't happen and we still enjoy them. The most popular example of that being James Bond. James Bond never really changes movie to movie. There was that one installment where he got married, but for the most part, all the movies are basically, he is who he is, he gets new gadgets, new opponents, new girls, and new set pieces. But there's always action, there's always explosions, there's always some kind of twisty espionage. He as a character never changes. That's okay for what that character is. That's kind of what we're going there for. And really, if he does change, we feel betrayed because James Bond's a playboy. But even in Superman 2, his alter ego, Clark Kent, underwent a change. In The Dark Knight, Batman, Bruce Wayne, undergo a change based on what the Joker does to them. The stories that really stick with us are the ones that take characters on an emotional journey, that continue that journey. So it's important that not only new things happen on the outside, but that they also occur on the inside. This whole thing with henchmen obsessed with Elvis, it's that comedic thing. We have this shot of Mother Teresa in the background and then Oliver North. You really have to be a child of the 80s to understand that reference. Internet search Oliver North Iran-Contra scandal for that. Or even Mother Teresa. She's been dead since the late 90s, so Robocop search Mother Teresa. "35 minutes, 50 seconds. You want me, dead or alive?" This Robocop is now a cliche machine. And then he even says, "Dead then." Well, Robocop, what about your prime directives? You can't just shoot a dude without bringing him in for the procedural justice. That's not Robocop. It's a great line. It makes no sense within the logic of his prime directive. So starting to violate the logic of the universe, of the characters, because it makes for cool set pieces, cool one-liners, and great images. There's some sort of electric magnetic grappling hook that attaches to his chest, and we get a fun little genre moment of cool effects, and Robocop is paralyzed, his arm is blown off, and he zaps her by putting that grappling hook to his arm. "37 minutes, 5 seconds. The super magnet is brought in and Robocop is captured." This is not really moving any drama between the characters forward. This is giving us great visuals. This is giving us genre. It's doing nothing. We feel like we're just standing still. The story in Robocop 2 here has become repetition. We had the promise. The core of what could have been were those scenes where they interrogated him. Are you human? You know, it's like, how many lights do you see? 5 or 4. then with him stalking his family, then with, again, seeing the wife. That's where this movie needed to start with. It needed to start with Murphy's journey. Is he really going to try to become a family man? Is he really going to try and somehow have a new life with them? Or is he going to accept that he is no longer human? He has the memories of a human, but he is a cyborg. He is a cop, and he must prevent a tragedy like this from happening again. He needs to clean up Detroit. He's reinvigorated. He's refocused. He needs to do something based on what goes on inside of him. Could he be friends with his family? Could he maintain any contact? He's, again, seen his wife, so how can that continue for him? This is just genre set-piece porn, okay? Just keep giving us money shots of Robocop. Keep giving us shots of different ways to see Robocop, his arms, his legs, give him a new weapon, put him back together. What's some new vision that he can have? Like in Predator 2, they just go crazy with the Predator vision. In the first one, we had the thermal vision. Then the second one, we get crazy Predator variety. We get 102 variations on the different vision the Predator has. This is cool effects right here, 39 minutes, 25 seconds, as they throw Robocop in pieces out of the limo onto the picket line where the police are protesting. And we got some good acting, good effects. This is very Total Recall-ish in terms of how the face looks. This looks cool again. There's something to be said for no CGI and just pure physical effects. Really like this. The new OCP representative, where Bob Morton was kind of the jerk, the soulless, heartless representative of the company that says that Robocop is just a product, a program, he's not human, so we're going to treat it as such. He comes in, he says, basically, we can't fix him because it's going to take millions of dollars, and we might have to scrap him, and everyone else sees Murphy, sees the face, and sees that we have to save him because of the humanity within him, not because he's a valuable product or a liability now. An important thing to consciously be aware of and to constantly be asking as we're watching a movie, as we're writing a screenplay, is where does each scene come from? Each scene needs to be generated by previous action, by a previous scene, by previous conflict. Characters battling for what they want, they achieve a part of their objective, they achieve a step towards gaining what they want, and they continue that struggle in another scene. They get a clue, they get a tip. Okay, here's where you find the $1 million case. Great. Cut to them going to the car, driving to that location. Then the opponent shows up and they're there to fight. Someone takes the case and now they gotta follow. A to B to C to D. Scenes are created because of previous scenes. People in action create future action. Why does this scene exist where the gang brings the corrupt officer Duffy to this abandoned hospital or whatever this building is? They get him drunk, he has the neck brace on, they knock him out. Why do they bring him into the room so that he can be butchered for all of them to see? Is it that he's no longer of any value because Robocop knows he's a crooked cop? If Robocop knows that, why did they let Duffy out of the hospital? Why isn't Duffy in jail and being interrogated for information related to Kane? Logic is starting to fall apart. Scenes are just happening because they're interesting set pieces or they're going to be gory because they're similar to what was done in the first movie. There's really no true reason for this moment to exist other than to show us in a very unworthy, unearned kind of way that Kane is psychotic, that he's insane, that he has no heart, that he's hooked on Nuke and there's absolutely nothing within him that's redeeming. And that's the reason he's uninteresting, because he has no humanity. The opponents that are interesting for us when we go to the movies, if we look at our history of favorite movies ever, the more human the opponent, the more interested we are, the more engrossed we are, the more we connect to wanting to have the main character overcome that character. Kane here is kind of in this daze, and he brings in Duffy, and he has Hobb, the kid there, and then this girl, who I don't know why she's part of the gang. She hasn't really stated her motivation or what drove her to be associated with King. Now here we have the super bloody scene, and Hobb looks away. There's a sense that Hobb's humanity is in there somewhere, that he's still revolted by certain things. I thought you said you were going to scare him. Doesn't he look scared? And then Kane takes Hobb's head and makes him watch the butchering. And Kane has this kind of weird look on his face, like he's gaining pleasure from watching this horror take place. Now, within that scene, in that moment, we could say, okay, that's horrible. Kane's a horrible guy. That increased his bad guy-osity, and we root more against him. But it's a very inhuman moment. It's a very alienating moment for us. It would have been more powerful if Kane would have had a heart-to-heart with someone in his gang, if we would have understood why he wants what he wants, if we would have understood his actions. Dick Jones in the original film, we know why he's an asshole. We know why he's a killer. He'll do anything to have control of the company. He's just totally greedy. He wants to be in charge. He wants to replace the old man. Because of that, we understand him. We don't like him, but we understand him. And we hate him more because he could be a good guy, but he chooses not to be. Edward the Longshanks in Braveheart is one of the greatest opponents ever because of his humanity, because he shares his motivations, because we know why he acts against William Wallace. We know his perspective, and while it's despicable and disgusting, we understand it, we understand that element of his humanity, and we can root against him. We don't know anything about Kane in this movie. And when you don't know anything about your opponent, when you don't understand what made them how they are, when you don't understand what drives them, they just become one-dimensional. They become a bad guy with a capital B, and they're just doing things because the main character needs someone to be in his way. Instead of an organic reason for the main character to be against him, it's just a forced cliche. Here's just the random bad guy in the city, and Robocop's got to stop him. There's a hint that he kind of thinks he's a god, and he's using Nuke to recruit new members into his church, and he's going to create some kind of twisted dystopia, utopia, where everyone's always high and they can just escape from reality, but it's not really explored, and it has some potential, but it totally fails. At 46 minutes 24 seconds, Robocop has a system failure, but right before that we had a scene in the jacuzzi spa area with the head of OCP and Mr. Johnson, and then the hot scientist girl who wants to create Robocop 2, and they talk about furthering their plans. So that's a fine scene. They discuss what they want, they move things forward, and there's a clear drive out and a setup so that when we see them again, they're obviously going to be looking for a candidate, someone that can become Robocop 2. That's fine. It's established. We can go with it. We cut back to Robocop being taken away for parts, it seems. He's had a system failure, so the corporate douchebag comes to take him away. Now we cut back to OCP. The new Bob Morton, the female version of him, is Dr. Fax. She is at the head of this meeting. She's in control. She also has a desire for power. Donald at the other end. His character is kind of staying the same from the first film. It'd be interesting if they would have gave him a more dynamic sort of character development here. Just put him on a journey. Every character should change in a movie. Every character should go through something. Al Powell, the cop in Die Hard, he goes through a change, and he's just on the CB with John McClane from time to time. Everybody in that movie which will have a future movie night because it's such a great example of an action drama. Everyone in that film goes through something. Everyone in Aliens goes through something. Everyone in the first Robocop had some kind of a growth, change, or somehow affected emotionally by what was going on in that film. Now notice, because Murphy as a human character, 48 minutes, 30 seconds, wow, they switched up the side that there's a hole in the eye of Robocop. In the first movie, they had a bullet go through the right side of the visor. This time, it's on the left side. That's gonna be awesome. Come on, guys, come on. Notice that what's happening to Robocop is pretty much the same thing that's happened before, and we're starting to feel like this is just dragging on. There's really nothing new. One possible way to make this more emotional for Robocop would have been to have his son addicted to Nuke. That's an off-the-top-of-the-head sort of easy solution. It could become dark. It could become basically a drama. That's the way to really do it. You start it out as a parent whose son becomes addicted to drugs. Now, go bigger picture. The parent happens to be a cop. Okay, so he can do a certain amount of things to help his son get off the drugs or to stop the dealers from making the drugs available. Now, go bigger. It's sci-fi, it's action, so it's a Robocop parent, and it's still his son. You always got to start it with that core of humanity, and then go back from there. This is a scene that seems to have been rewritten. It's very similar to what's gone on earlier, and these are the moments that we need to have. 50 minutes, 35 seconds. The new doctor, there's so many doctors plugging in their information into Robocop and looking over at him in this film. She's reprogramming Robocop. She's going to give him like 200 new directives. And this movie takes yet a more comedic turn with his character and the tone of it. The tone of this film is so far removed from the original that it just becomes eye-rollingly annoying. We just sit there in the theater thinking, oh God, is this really happening? This reminds me a lot of Spider-Man 3. It's the equivalent of taking Harry and giving him amnesia so that the conflict that was going on between him and Peter Parker is on pause until the end of the movie. If that didn't happen in that film, the conflict, the drama would have had to have been dealt with in that moment. It would have created new dynamics and new roads for the story to take, but because there was a predetermined path, that drama had to be put on pause. More on that in a future Spider-Man 3 movie night. That movie definitely needs to be analyzed and dissected. Here's a nice twisted sort of moment, 52 minutes, where the kids are robbing the store. This goes back to the idea of Hobb as the ruthless drug dealer kid. It's really funny, and it's definitely over the top, where you have the coach of the kids pull out a gun and start to shoot at Robocop and Lewis. You just get this sense that no one in this society has any shame, there's no more laws. You just got to do what you got to do in order to survive. It's funny and it's surprising, but it's very inauthentic. It feels very forced and it doesn't fit with what the original movie was about. Now you have Robocop walking over. Good morning, I think we should talk. And then Lewis shoots the guy in the head. The coach is dead as the kids are in the store, and the one kid comes out of the car. "53 minutes, 12 seconds. And then you have the battered owner of the store. The tonal shifts here are clashing with each other, and it's not really working. It's funny, but it's not what was established originally, and it's so far removed from what we were expecting that it's just like, what is this? What's this about? There haven't been any more newscasts or commercials since the opening. The great thing about the original was that Verhoeven was good about keeping a sort of pacing to that. We would get newscasts on a regular enough basis. Just when it felt like we needed one, it happened. And there was a consistency, so we got the impression that the filmmaker was taking the pulse of the audience and was feeling when the time was right to throw in a little bit of a tidbit, do a little satire here and there, to keep everything that was introduced as a storytelling technique consistent, to move it forward. You don't want to introduce something in a story, to do something as a filmmaker, and then abandon it midway through. It's going to feel cheap. It's going to feel like, well, what was the point of that? Here, as Robo starts doing all of his, think about your mother and father, and that isn't the right thing to do, and all of a sudden he's like Robocop from the 1950s. The posted limit is 35. You're in a Johnny cab. It is funny, but it's very much like the Transformers. It's comedy replacing drama. It's laughs instead of conflict. And because of that, we feel entertained on a genre level, but we feel that we're missing something when it comes to the story level. This should really be about Robocop pursuing an objective. "55 minutes, 30 seconds into the movie, into the screenplay, page 55, 56. What is Robocop's objective? He's been dismembered, and OCP was on the verge of basically throwing him away, saying that it would take too much money. It wasn't worth the investment to repair him." Go a refrigerator, Peckerhead. That's a... Bad language makes for bad feelings. 56 minutes. Kids are ruthless. Kids are animals in this universe. It's kind of like Lord of the Flies on a bigger scale. Comedy, comedy, comedy. Robocop gets graffitied. Kick me. And then, of course, this was a funny moment in the trailer when all of a sudden he gets overly agitated and he moves Lewis out of the way, shoots around this guy, and says, "Thank you for not smoking." It's funny, but it is totally dishonest when it comes to the character and the story. This has been a big side trip. After the threat from OCP that they weren't going to spend the money on Robocop and they were just going to throw him away, all of a sudden the scientist decides, okay, we're going to spend the millions, we're going to put him back into Robocop tip-top shape, but we're going to put like 300 stupid directives in his brain. And he's going to go around and make us laugh for 10, 15 minutes. What was the point of that? And then all of a sudden here, 57 minutes, 20 seconds, as the scientist explains to Lewis what's going on with Robocop. He unplugs himself because all of a sudden now he's self-aware, yet he wasn't self-aware when he was kneeling before a fire hydrant reciting poetry, and now he's going to electrocute himself. So what did she do that motivated him to change? At this point, the illogic is just too annoying. It stands out. It keeps interfering with our enjoyment of the story, of the scrambled, rewritten, obviously forced deadline existence of this script, which had a cohesive idea with Miller writing it, but because it was deemed unmarketable and too challenging, too risky, was rewritten. We get a Frankenstein version of what this movie could have been. Why did he electrocute himself? We know that the obvious answer is because he wanted these programs erased, but it doesn't make sense because he just did a bunch of stupid things and he wasn't aware of what he was doing. So what would make him aware enough to want to do this? No motivation for that. No motivation for a lot of things in this film. And at this point, a lot of the motivations become forced. They become puppeted by the filmmakers because we have to get to a fade out. We have to get to an act 3. We have to get to a resolution. And we have to give people a movie, not necessarily their money's worth because that would mean a good film. We have to do it because it's required. So he electrocutes himself and all of a sudden, where you going? I gotta get Kane. He's bugging me. So now we're back on track when it comes to Robocop having an objective. The opponent is Kane. Robocop wants to get Nuke off the streets. The people in his way are Kane and the gang, and sometimes OCP, even though there was no logical motivation for that OCP scientist to bring him back to restored form and then give him all these directives. Why not just get him out of the way? 1 hour into the movie, we have Frank Miller in a cameo as Frank the chemist in this little mobile lab. That is Frank Miller, the writer. Kane gives him some advice on making the drug more effective. We get a commentary there, made in America. Everyone's addicted to this thing. But we don't understand the motivation of the gang. Is it to cause chaos on the streets of Detroit? Is the old man at OCP funding this gang? Is he behind them? What are the connections? What are the motivations? This is the problem with this entire sequel. None of it really makes sense. It doesn't come out of character. All of a sudden now Robocop is back, and the tonal shifts are all over the place. Now Robocop is back in action. What if we cut out everything that's happened to Robocop from the moment he was dismembered by Kane's gang, and we cut to 1 hour, 1 minute into the movie when he leads the police officers on a raid of this drug factory? By doing that, the story becomes focused. It maintains Robocop's objective of stopping Kane, getting Nuke off the street, and it removes all of that comedic relief that's happened as a result of his earlier encounter with Kane and the gang. Great kill shot right there. That's genre. And then we get Robocop not looking and under the elbow of the other arm, shooting the other guy. So 1 hour, 1 minute, 45 seconds. Great genre set pieces, good action. This is what we want in this film, but we also want it to make sense and for it to be character-based. The previous scenes taking place at OCP, those could be kept because they move that story forward. It tracks the progress of the OCP doctor, the OCP scientist, and her project on Robocop 2. That's fine. But everything that we've seen for the last 30 minutes or so has really been a big distraction and a total detour when it comes to tight screenplay structure. Really like how Robocop doesn't look at anybody when he shoots and he's right on target. That goes back to the earlier idea in the first film when he just targets everybody when he gets to a new location. The little kid shooting this crazy automatic weapon, that's just funny to look at. But it's just that playing against expectation. It's way over the top. That's what these films are about, though. It's about shock, not for shock's sake. It's about taking ideas and pushing them to their extremes, but making them believable. The problem with part 2 so far is that the tone has been shifting so much, we no longer really care and are invested in this character and in this universe. We have Frank Miller in the laboratory explode, and that's kind of how he felt during this film. Even though he wasn't happy with what the studio did to his screenplay, he still showed up on set and wanted to be involved in the film so he could learn what the process was all about. A lesson he continued to learn in part 3, where he thought things were going to be better after having written that film. And the same thing happened. So he learned a lesson of make sure you are the director. Make sure you are the one that has final control of what happens to the written word. Because the screenplay is the first vision. Then there's the producer's vision and the director's vision. And usually the last two are stronger than the first. Fun moment with Robocop on the door of this truck. 1 hour, 4 minutes, 59 seconds. We just had him being scraped along the wall in the alley. I like this moment when he grabs the motorcycle, the guy flips off of it. That's a great stunt, great visual, cool idea. Robocop on a motorcycle, that's something we haven't seen yet. One of the challenges in sequels is to give us variations on a theme. So things we've seen before, things we haven't. Then it becomes kind of comical if there's yet another sequel and all it is let's make Robocop fly. He was on a motorcycle, he was in a car, he has a gun, now let's give him a missile launcher. Remember that from the preview when they have Robocop spinning the bike around. That's heavily featured in the preview. Then we have the showdown between him and Kane. Again, Kane as a opponent, we don't really care about him. We have no idea what he is motivated by. So when there's a showdown here between the two, we are obviously rooting for Robocop and we could really care less. We don't know what it means. Now imagine at this moment, if in a darker version of the screenplay, Robocop's son had OD'd on Nuke. Now knowing that, as Robo is driving towards Kane, wouldn't there be more emotion invested? Wouldn't there be a rage? And wouldn't we, the audience, really want Robocop to get his revenge on Kane? What could have motivated this whole raid could have been, instead of being reawakened by some electric shock, the news, his wife comes to him and says that, well, our son hasn't been doing really well since he lost his father. He turned to drugs. I couldn't really do much. I'm a single parent. I have to work. I tried my best. He got addicted to Nuke, started hanging out with the wrong crowd, and our son is gone, and it's all Kane's fault. That takes it in a more emotional direction. Is it a little cliche? You know, always have the cop's son affected by some drugs. It's an idea. It's an example of doing something that would have a more emotional investment. Now, that's idea number one. The challenge is, as a writer, as a filmmaker, as someone who's trying to give us creativity we haven't experienced before, we want the third or fourth variation on that idea. Keep going forward. Don't settle for just that initial impulse, because it's probably something that everyone else has thought of. Take it to a new place, put it in a new direction. If Robocop is someone who wants to have that humanity again, who wants to experience pain and have the feelings of his Murphy former self, let's give him some tragedy. You know, does he really want that? Or maybe he could just take the easy road and become a program-obeying, non-human cyborg creation. That's what this is about, exploring aspects of humanity, exploring what it means to be human. So if he really wants it, if there is that setup earlier of his wife coming to talk to him, why not have that added element? How is it that Robocop remembers his son as this Leave It to Beaver fun kid who's playing baseball and seems to be unaffected, even though he lives in this dirty, violent, corrupted place? Somehow his son hasn't been touched by that. In the first movie, they just moved to this city, so it's obvious that they would have yet to be influenced by it. But now by the sequel, after all this tragedy has happened to the family, after the son probably learns that his dad is Robocop, maybe he learns it too late, maybe the pain of losing his dad as soon as they moved to the city crushed his young, sensitive soul, and he went to school, started hanging out with some kids that are like the rest of these kids, robbing the store, beating people up with bats. Something to think about. That's where it should go. One hour, 9 minutes, 35 seconds. The doctor comes to Kane, and now she talks about how she wants his brain, and she's going to use him in her Robocop project. Kane as an opponent, again, he's been doing horrible things. Dr. Fax, F-A-X-X. So she's the one who's equally as insane as everyone else. This is a nice little moment when she says, oh, he expired, and he's fighting to stay alive. He understands what she said. She wants what she wants, and she's ruthless. Everyone in this culture has very little regard for human life. Even on the little kid level, they're playing around a fire hydrant, they're going to a store. They don't care, they'll rob, they'll cheat, they'll abuse, they'll commit acts of violence. This is the culture that's going on. A couple of minutes ago, there was a newscast and a fake commercial. So it happened finally after about an hour of watching the movie. The commercial was okay. It commented on the ozone layer, the joke about you can go in the sun for 20 minutes if you just cake this blue stuff all over you, but watch out, that might also give you cancer. That's fine. It's funny, but it's like, okay. Then there was the newscast, gave you a little bit of an update about what's going on with the story. Okay, good. But also pepper in the bigger picture. We want to see the world that this is taking place in. How has the world changed since the events of Robocop? If Robocop gave us the bigger picture and it took steps down to the smaller picture, from world scale to Detroit scale to OCP to Murphy scale, continue that pattern. And we want to see how all those different areas have moved forward. What's the war like now in Mexico? We get a little Amazon rainforest and a nuclear reactor there. Great commentary, that's a nice fun thing. Keep it all moving forward, keep it connected, keep it progressing. Don't get lazy. If you establish it, think it through, continue it. We want to see that you as a filmmaker are invested as much as we, the audience, are. We care about this franchise. We're going to pay money for it. We know that it's an easy money-making thing for you as a studio or a filmmaker to do this. But give us that inspiration. Put some heart and soul into it. Show us the Murphy side, not just the Robocop side. Don't be so OCP about it. This is all kind of goofy, but interesting at the same time. Spinal column, brain, and eyes. In the vat, and we see Kane's face. We get the gore here. Gore factor continues from the initial film. And by then, the influence of Robocop had made it acceptable for films to go to this extreme. So by 1990, Total Recall is definitely going to one-up the ante on violence and blood. We get the intro of the human shield. More comedy here as we get Detroit help save the Motor City, and the mayor doing a public TV, PBS sort of thing let's raise money so we can keep our city. Again, this character is too comical, the actor is playing it way too hammy, way too over the top, and just the whole thing with that guy playing the violin between his legs, that's funny, but none of that was going on in the original movie. If you want to stay true, keep that tone. The tonal shift here is too much, and let's now talk about one thing that can really add to the tone of a film, worked so well in Robocop, is the score. Here the composer is Leonard Roseman, and the decision was made not to use any of the Robocop theme music from the original. So we do not hear the classic Robocop theme music at all in this film. The music here really takes away, on at least that emotional subconscious level, from the enjoyment and the connection of the film. It's just too comical, it's too light. It lacks a lot of depth and the power that music from the first movie had. That music returns to the third film, and it just goes to show that if music and emotion aren't together, aren't feeding off of each other, it doesn't matter if that original score returns, if the characters aren't there to be affected by it, or the music isn't there to pull out the right type of emotions, it's not going to work. It's, again, that whole cut and paste filmmaking. It's that idea that, well, whatever worked in a previous film, we can just throw that in this one, and it's going to be okay. No, the original movie, the completed film, gave inspiration to Basil as a composer to come up with that score, to come up with all the music cues. So it really comes down to the writing and the creation of the film leading to the inspiration of having him now say, okay, this is what the emotions create. This is how to heighten it. This is how to bring the audience closer to these characters. That doesn't happen with this score. It totally ignores the success of the first. It's not influenced by that. At least give us some overtones, because it would be exactly like Hans Zimmer not using the classic Batman cue from his Batman Begins score, or heightening it in The Dark Knight, and then again morphing it appropriately in The Dark Knight Rises. That original score for Robocop is identified with that character. So now as the character goes on his journey and changes because of the drama and the conflict, allow the score, which is basically a materialization of the emotional state of being of the character. The score is the music of emotion of that character. So allow the composer to get a sense of how that character's changed, and then appropriately modify those themes and those tones. Not bringing back Basil Polidorus for this really hurt the film, or at least going with what he started in terms of the thread. Take the threads and continue to create a tapestry here, an audio tapestry, an emotional tapestry. Really hurts. 1 hour, 17 minutes, 45 seconds. The mayor meets the evil kid at some abandoned warehouse. A lot of abandoned warehouses. Very cool set. Looks really great on a wide shot. And now he's going to give the mayor money and basically make a deal to allow his crime syndicate to go free in Detroit. We've been away from Robocop for a number of scenes here. 1 hour, 18 minutes, 25 seconds. We've cut back to OCP as Dr. Fax has created Robocop 2, has used the brain of Kane to become one with its robotic counterpart, and now she's going to be feeding it Nuke in order to survive. Okay, this logic is just becoming stupid. Why are you, as a scientist, going to choose a criminal that's addicted to a super heightened, crazy, outrageous drug to become the brain that you use in the prototype for Robocop 2? Then you're going to have to feed it Nuke? And you think you're going to control it? Jeez. Come on, dude. Really? Like, can I leave the theater right now? It's so annoying. It's just like, you're not even trying. Like, just have it make sense. It's, The thing with Robocop 1 was Clarence Boddicker, you believed his ass. It's so laughable. I mean, it just gets worse and worse as it goes along. Seriously, who thought, like, on the list of bad ideas, and there's no justification for her to be stupid or insane. She's power hungry. Okay, that's fine. And they kind of justify it in terms of why his psychotic brain would maybe work with the robot and would accept its cybernetic existence and all that, but it's just so forced. It just doesn't telegraphs the whole notion that obviously you're not going to be able to control this guy. Obviously, this dude who has kind of been established as having like this delusions of grandeur, messianic complex, is going to think that because he's been chosen to have this robot body, now he's going to be like this immortal god, and he's not going to listen to you, and you just gave him superpowers, and no one can stop him except for Robocop, who you decided to program as an idiot earlier. Come on, dude. As a character, as a supposedly intelligent scientist, just act like one. Just, wouldn't it be more powerful? Wouldn't it make more sense and have more of an impact if Kane somehow found out about this project, and because his beliefs are that he is a god, he is the new Jesus, he is the new whatever religious figure you want to use, and everyone in the city is a member of his flock, and he wants to have immortal life and ultimate power, and Robocop is in his way, wouldn't he then somehow choose to have his brain removed and then put in place of the other one they were going to use? Wouldn't it be more acceptable and that much more interesting and gut-wrenchingly thrilling if she was a, let's say, quote-unquote good scientist who had a good brain from a cop who had fallen in the line of duty, somebody similar to Murphy, or some kind of candidate that we could accept, like someone who would make a great Robocop, who would be just and honest and do the right things much as Alex Murphy had. And right before it's going to happen, one of Kane's minions, maybe the little kid here or whoever, gets in there, exchanges the brains, and before you know it, Kane is the one that's in the body, and he goes nuts and he tries to take things over. That would make sense. It's based in motivations that are logical, emotional, and not cliche when it comes to the screenwriting. We would accept Kane more as an opponent. We would say, okay, that's his goal. He wants to be immortal, he wants to be in charge, he wants to be a god. And we would accept this Dr. Fax as someone who's intelligent and who's more of a career ladder climber. She's more of like a Bob Morton. But instead we just get this forced illogic, this stupid, obviously we know what's going to happen in the end. And notice Robocop has not been on the screen for like at least 10 minutes. How long in the first film does it go without him on screen? Maybe 2 minutes. We cut to OCP, we cut back to Robocop. We cut to Clarence Boddicker, we cut to OCP, we cut to Robocop. 2 to 3 minutes max. I mean, you cannot leave the main character for an extended period of time like this. The reason it is happening from a screenplay structural analysis perspective is that there isn't enough conflict based on Robocop's objectives. Add to that the lack of thematic journey for him, and now we need, as filmmakers, as storytellers, if this is the mess that we have on our hands, we have to fill in the gaps of time on screen. So we start creating B and C storylines. We focus more on Dr. Fax making Robocop 2. We focus more on Kane's gang here. Later here, after he's Robocop 2, we have this extended scene with him dealing with the former members that he once trusted. This at the time, believe it or not, 1 hour, 25 minutes, the screen with this computer animated face, that was pretty high tech. There's another movie starring Jeff Fahey and Pierce Brosnan right around the same time called Lawnmower Man. And that was pretty advanced when it came to its computer effects. So this is very Lawnmower Man-ish with the way that it looks. This moment here where Kane and his former girlfriend are kind of touching, she's touching his metal arm. It's an interesting moment between two characters that once trusted each other. There's something there between the characters that works on that dramatic level, and it's captured well when it comes to the filmmaking. And even though this is a cheesy CGI rendition of Kane's face, we get the emotions that he's feeling. And we know now that he's going to kill her because he feels betrayed, and now he's going to be going after Hobb. Give us a sense of what Kane is feeling as he is in Robocop 2. He's become beyond human. He's become something more. We need access to him as a character, especially after he's undergone such a major change. The reason we care about Hans Gruber, Alan Rickman's portrayal of him in Die Hard, is because he talks to his henchmen, because he shares his feelings regarding John McClane and how he's messing up his plan. We gain access into that character, and we start to feel closer to him. We at least understand him. We don't have to like him. We don't have to root for him, but we actually have to root against him. The only way to root against him is to understand him. If we don't understand his unique perspective on his actions, we fill them in with memories of previous films. We take the actions that have become cliche or old or tired, and we fill them in. Okay, this is just a typical drug dealer bad guy. He just is crazy. Okay, whatever. There's no bigger motivation. Robocop finally shows up, by the way, hour 27 minutes, 38 seconds. He's too late to the party. From a filmmaking point of view, as a director, Peter Weller shows up on scene. Okay, cameras are about to roll. Okay, Peter, Robocop's motivation is blank. You as a character, you as Murphy, as Robocop right now, what are you feeling inside? Let's convey that, and your motivation is what? That's a fun game to play. When you're watching a movie, as a scene starts, what is the direction given to the actor? What is the actor conveying? What's the motivation? Why does Robocop show up here? All right, this is going to be fun. Hour, 28 minutes, 14 seconds, Robocop arrives at the scene of the massacre. When was the last time we saw him on screen? 1 hour, 6 minutes. He rammed into Kane in the truck when he was on the motorcycle, and then we saw him on the newscast. 22 minutes without the main character. Let's ask this question. How did Robocop know to come to this location? Last time we saw him, there was no setup, there was no drive out for him. There was no ongoing conflict, drama, or motivation for him to come here. What should have happened after he caught Kane was a window character scene where he shared his emotional baggage of what it meant to catch Kane. Now, let's look at this. Hour and 29, 15 seconds. He holds the hand of Hobb, who is dying. He's been shot by Kane, or Robocop 2. And as a brutally monstrous drug lord sidekick henchman, this kid was horrible. And now we're supposed to all of a sudden feel sad for him. The only redeeming moment he had earlier was that he didn't want to watch Duffy, the cop, being sliced up, but Kane made him. So you kind of get the sense that Kane twisted this kid a little bit. If you want us to feel sorry for this kid, there's got to be more. There's got to be more redemption for him. There's got to be more humanity to him. So he, as a character, needs to have someone that he talks to about why he's become this way. When characters don't share what goes on inside of them, we stay distanced. And we just fill in these blanks and say, okay, they're just these cliche bad guy characters, and there's nothing more to them. So if we wanted to feel some kind of a death, some kind of an emotional impact with Hobbs' death, we needed to know more about him. If we play with this idea that Robocop had his son die earlier because of Nuke, and that motivated his extreme desire to bring Kane down and to stop the flow of Nuke on the street, that would have gave more weight to this moment when Robocop didn't get a chance to say bye to his son. And here Hobb, who ideally, again, in a rewrite, would have shared what made him leave his family, was swearing and shooting everyone up. Then that moment when Robo's holding his hand is really Robo holding his son's hand, and kind of a once removed way to say goodbye to his son that never happened for him. That's how you get emotion into this film. One hour, 31 minutes, 22 seconds. Mr. Johnson and the old man, the boss of OCP, are showing up for the presentation of Robocop 2. It's a big media event, and notice the banners. Very oppressive and totalitarian, very Nazi reminiscent. Back quickly to the idea of the illogic of character action here. Robocop showed up to that warehouse. Again, this bears repeating. 22 minutes after we last saw him, with no motivation, no reason to be there, no reason to know about it. It's just like, oh, we got to have him on screen. And again, the reason it was 22 minutes without Robocop was because the B and C storylines had enough momentum, had enough characters pursuing objective that it kept us wondering what was going to happen, because you have Dr. Fax. She's going to use Kane's brain to make Robocop 2. You have OCP and their objectives with wanting Robocop 2 and the whole Delta City thing. And then we have the mayor needing to raise money to keep the city out of corporate control. And he goes to make a deal with the devil later. All without Robocop, because Robocop as a character has nothing to fight for. He's not invested in anything emotionally. There are no stakes for him. He's not pursuing an objective. He caught Kane. The minute he catches Kane, we don't need Robocop anymore. What happens then is basically a restart of the screenplay structure, because Robocop's not going after the old man of OCP. He's not going after the mayor of the city. Kane is no longer a threat. So we have to restart a new threat. We have to give Robocop a new objective. Right now, he's just chilling out in his chair, recharging. We're definitely missing those emotional scenes where he should talk to Lewis. Well, we caught Kane, so what does that mean for us? We don't get that because there's no tracking, there's no consistency in following Robocop's journey on that level. He's done with the outer journey, and the inner journey never started. We had a couple scenes with his wife and his kid. Those are gone, never to return. We have no more interior focus on what's going on with Murphy. We're instead focusing on creating Villain Part 2, Robocop Part 2, so that he has something to fight in the end here. This is a great visual, 1 hour, 34 minutes, 34 seconds. Robocop 2 rises among the model of the new Detroit, of Delta City. The mayor reacts in a scared manner because he saw what he's capable of. Where is Murphy? Where is Lewis? Where's the Sarge? Where are any of these characters that give us any kind of emotional investment? What's the story? For 22 minutes, Robocop had nothing to do. So they created a new opponent, and they had that opponent go off and serve their objective, which was stop the mayor from getting the money so he could save the city. And this is stupid here. 1 hour, 35 minutes, 18 seconds. The old man has the nuke in his hand, and for some reason the doctor didn't mention to him what that would do, and she doesn't really expect Kane to go after it. Oh, it's like, come on, man. Just think through your so annoying when movies take shortcuts like this. It's not that hard to go through a screenplay and just circle in big red ink like this makes no sense. Fix this. Go back earlier in the film, fix a scene so that later this has some logic to it and we don't have to be taken out of the film. Donald Johnson looks back at Dr. Fax, and she gives this reaction that's kind of comical, like, oh, okay, I guess I'll turn him off. And for some reason, she can't turn him off here, but when it wants to turn on its weapons, the remote control works then. So this button works, but apparently the button to turn him off doesn't work. And there's no explanation. Why is he still functioning without any nuke? If he gets the nuke, is he going to be superpowered? Is he going to become more psychotic? Problem also with Kane in Robo 2 form is that he doesn't communicate anything. Even if the opponent becomes supercharged. Think back to any film where an opponent takes any drug and becomes like super opponent, or learns how to use the Force and becomes super Sith. One of my favorite examples would be The Matrix. Agent Smith has the equivalent of Neo's power in the second film. He starts talking about, hey, here's how I feel. I didn't know what you did to me, but when I was reborn, I was disconnected from the Matrix, but yet I'm on my own and I feel powerful and I'm like your opposite yin-yang, universal balance, and blah, blah, blah. Kane needs to express what he wants as Robocop 2. Basically, at 1 hour, 37 minutes, 40 seconds, we get a rehash of his battle with Ed 209 from the first movie. Robocop 2, Kane in robot form, has no advantage over Ed 209. He's just a bigger version. He's a different design. The thing that's special about him, the potential that he has as an opponent, is that there's a human brain in there, a really twisted, sociopathic, psychotic, crazy, killer brain in there. This guy has delusions of grandeur. There was that really interesting tape that he made at the beginning of the movie that the news showed, and that could have been heightened. That could have been explored even more. But instead we just get robots fighting each other, and there's really no bigger picture for either of them, and there's no emotional investment. Give us something more. In the rewrite of this, Kane as a human needs to be thought through. He needs to share his goals, his dreams, even if they are crazy, insane dreams. And when he becomes a robot, when he heightens his abilities here, now what does he want to do? Robocop is fighting an emotion-free battle. "You're coming with me, Kane." It's a cool line. Not really, but it's on paper, it's a fulfillment of genre set-piece expectation. But for Murphy as a character here, doesn't do anything. Yeah, it's cool that they fall from a roof. Robocop 2 running up the elevator shaft looked really awesome. The battle here is going to go on forever, and we're not going to feel a thing. Go back to Robocop 1. As Murphy is fighting Boddicker, Dick Jones, the henchman. How do you feel watching that versus how you feel watching this? Again, if we take our initial level 1 suggestion, Kane was the one basically responsible for Murphy's kid overdosing. And Robocop thought that he brought justice by bringing Kane in, much the way that he thought bringing Boddicker in the first film avenged his death. Now it avenges his son's death. But as Kane's still alive, Murphy continues the pursuit and wants to bring Kane to justice. It's super simple. That's just what you do in your initial draft. Write your first draft with your heart. Pour out any idea that comes out. It's like putting dynamite in a cave and just blowing it open, hoping there's some gold, hoping there's some diamonds in there. You just have to let all the rocks tumble out. You need to have an avalanche of potential nuggets, potential gems of ideas, of concepts come out. So write that first draft, refine it with your second draft, take a look at what works, what's interesting, and then start to polish it. Start to challenge those ideas, those concepts, and say, okay, how can this go to the next level? What did the first movie do? What worked? Why did it work? And how do we now go beyond that? How do we one-up it? How do we take it and enhance it? How do we continue the journey for the characters here? Now we get basically 20-minute ridiculous action sequence that, again, on a pure action movie, appreciate the effort of the filmmakers and the pyrotechnics, and I love, again, practical effects always impact us more powerfully than CGI effects. Love the effort that's put in here, even though it's not really so good for the environment. CGI, I guess, is a way to go green. Green screen literally does help the planet in the respect that we don't have to blow up buildings for cool action set pieces. But this sequence is just nonstop chaos. It's fun, kinetic, physical energy on screen, but it has zero emotional relevance for us. When Lewis is struggling towards that OCP military gun at the end of part 1, and as Clarence's fellow bad guy is in that control booth, cheering the fact that he just dumped all this metal on Robocop, we in the audience are really pulling for her. We want her to get to that gun and fire it, and we cheer when he blows up. And as Clarence is pummeling Robocop with the metal rod and then stabbing him with it, we hate him. We want Robocop to somehow stop him. And when he does it in a very over-the-top action movie set piece kind of way. And we cheer for that, but we also cheer on the emotional level. So as Kane is going nuts here, this is almost Hot Shots Part 2 comical right here. I mean, Kane is just machine gunning everything. This dude here, by the way, like, talk about reference to Nazi. The guy that Lewis just kicked off of the tank, 1 hour, 44 minutes, 20 seconds. She just kicked him off, and she's going to ram Robocop 2 into the wall here. This is all feelingless. It's definitely exciting. It looks cool. But do you ever get the sensation when you're watching a movie like this, how boring this gets? It's the same sensation that we had while watching Sucker Punch. Really great set pieces, amazing visuals, but no impact on us emotionally. And if a film doesn't work there, it's not going to work at all. Great special effects, very cool looking. Notice 1 hour, 45 minutes, 12 seconds. Robocop is standing beside Lewis. He has some battle damage. We cut to Dr. Fax, and she smiles as Kane comes back to life. She's very much proud of her creation, but we need to know more about her. Why is she so obsessed with having this creation survive? She's just Dr. Frankenstein, just some cliche, okay, I'm just smart and I want people to respect me. Is that the basic motivation? When you don't define your characters specifically, we, the audience, define them generically. It's in the specificity, it's in the details of character and story nuance and even costumes and set design. It's on those specific little levels where we start to feel the true reality and the effort that's been put in. Kane gets his nuke, his super dose of nuke, but we never get the sense of what that would have done. He's been functioning just fine without any drugs. So what's the point of giving it to him? How is this going to affect him? Again, he's not a character that's sharing any kind of thoughts. Usually, at this point, if Kane was human, and that's the right way to approach any type of opponent, even if they are robotic, treat them as if they're a person, and then add the genre. Again, it's drama first, then genre on top of that. Literally here, as Robocop pulls out the brainstem, 1 hour, 47 minutes, 28 seconds, he's pulling out that dramatic human core. Surrounding that has been the genre. So always deal at the core with that humanity, even if it is a quote-unquote evil human. This is an absolutely great visual metaphor for story design and storytelling. Within a very well-designed genre set piece, there needs to be the heart and smarts of a human. Much like Robocop 2 tumbling over at 1 hour and 48 minutes, so too does any story that doesn't put that humanity within its genre. As Robocop destroys the brain, crushes it, it's over the top, great effects, it's what we want in terms of the genre, we feel nothing. We just say, okay, well, Kane's gone. Because as a human, as an opponent, in any other movie, that would have been Hans Gruber saying, here's what I want to do. You know, if you want to steal 6 million, you can disappear. If you want to steal 600 million, they will find you. And he's an exceptional thief. It's the classic, as the bad guy's got the gun pointed at the good guy, he tells him his whole plan. He tells him what he thinks about him before he's going to kill him. There needs to be communication with that opponent. We had no idea who Kane was. Other than that opening video, Kane did not, throughout any part of this film, tell us what he believed and what he wanted. He was just getting high and looking kind of pervy. He's a drug-addicted, cliche bad guy. The most interesting character here is the old man. Hour 49 minutes, 45 seconds. He backstabs Dr. Fax as he tells Johnson, yeah, do that thing that we talked about. He's going to make her take the fall for OCP. It was all her design. So OCP is going to get away scot-free. And if she wasn't there to take the fall, then they would lose their stock and they would be brought down to their knees in terms of their power and influence. They would be bankrupt. Here's something that's totally unnecessary. We're only human, and he's starting to take off the Robocop mask again. It ends the exact same way the previous film did. The music, of course, is different, so we don't get that same impact. We get a different type of impact. The music, I guess, seems to be true for what this film was, but unfortunately, it all leads to a emotion-free experience. Now we get Robocop 2. Really go through this film again and notice how that final sequence, we don't care. It just drags on forever. He's fighting Kane because he's a crazy robot, but there's really no bigger scheme. What would happen if Kane beat Robocop? What are the stakes? If Dick Jones was allowed to go through with his plan for Ed 209, what would have happened to Detroit? There was a bigger threat there. Dick Jones was ruthless. We knew what he wanted. We knew who he was as a character. We don't know anything about Kane here. We don't know anything about any of the characters here. We could edit all of the scenes that Robocop is in this film, and we would have a very inconsistent, chaotic, character-motivated journey. He doesn't do things because of any type of objective that he has, and there's absolutely no character momentum on a thematic internal level. He starts out as kind of like Murphy at the end of the previous film, but not 100% going towards the human that he was becoming at the end of the original. Then he becomes comedic relief, and then he returns kind of to the way he was at the beginning of the film. One of the significant visual aspects of the first film, and in Act 3 as he fought Clarence and the gang, was to have his mask removed. Here he's got his mask on the entire time. He starts to unscrew it at the end, and there's the line, "We're only human," but it's so dishonest. It's not earned. We're not only human. No one in this movie is human. Everyone's just one-dimensional. They're just being puppeted around, not motivated by any internal goals or desires. They're just being pushed around because the genre needs to have action happen. Explosions need to occur. Everything is forced. And unfortunately, this happened a lot with sequels in the 90s. Nowadays, it seems that because of the tentpole mentality, because of the comic book adaptation craze that we've just gone through, there is a little more respect for a complete trilogy, where someone like a Christopher Nolan gets to have a complete vision of a character, of a journey, of story. And now that Joss Whedon is going to be directing Avengers 2, that seems to be taking place there. Now with horror movies or quote-unquote lesser genres, maybe the care isn't there, but when there's big properties and a huge fan base, it seems to garner a little more respect and care. It all comes down to the source material. Robocop 2 in 1990 is a movie that is influenced by the sequel craze of the 80s, the blockbuster mentality that was born out of the mid-70s, where Spielberg and Lucas started having huge success and big time draw, and there were lines around the block, and the multiplexes were born in the 80s. And movies became a bigger business than ever. The assembly line mentality started to happen. The basic motivation for Robocop 2 was that, okay, the first one was a hit. Merchandising is pretty popular. Everyone knows the name. There's a comic book now. So let's go with a sequel. We hire a respected writer for it. Unfortunately, it's too challenging, so let's just kind of make some corrections. We've got it slated for production. We got to get it out middle of summer for 1990, so it's going to happen regardless. Let's just do it. Doesn't matter if it's really going to be any good. And unfortunately, as we've seen, it's too inconsistent, it's too genre-based, and it ignores characters. Going into this movie night, I thought of just doing the first film because, Robocop 2, Robocop 3, what's the point? They're really bad sequels. This is probably one of the worst trilogies out there when it comes to parts 2 and 3. But these movies really need attention because we can learn so much from them. Because we can go back and watch this and pause it and analyze it, the potential for movie education on a mass scale is there. We can really learn a lot from Robocop 2. The only way to avoid mistakes in the movie future is to learn from those in the movie past. Now, we will continue this journey to the final step, to the final destination, which is part 3, somehow managed to be released in the theaters, where we have a new director, same writer, and unfortunately a new actor playing Robocop. One final little element would be that this film did try to address the bigger picture, tried to respect the sci-fi requirement that if you're going to go fantastic and have a guy be a robot, why not bring up some of the issues that automatically would lend you to explore as a storyteller, as a filmmaker. Man versus machine, corporate control of society, privatization of police, privatization of everything, the value of human life, the drug war, drugs on the streets, news, reporting news for the sake of entertainment, sensationalism versus information and an educated public. All these things are present here, but in a very almost genre requirement kind of way, because Verhoeven established that in the first film. It's like you have to do it in this film, so okay, we're going to comment on the rainforest being abused by having the nuclear reactor stacks in the background. We're going to have this funny commercial for the ozone layer sunblock cream. So it works on a comedic level. When it all comes down to a character. What does this person want? Why do they want it? Who's trying to stop them? And why the should we, the audience, care? Make us care about everyone. Everyone in this movie has a journey. Even Lewis was disrespected in this film. She should have had a journey. Everybody's a person, everybody is their own world, and we want people to move forward as we go forward with them. Robocop is as empty as the innards of the Robocop 2 machine after Kane's brain has been removed, and it falls flat on its face, much like that opponent does at the end of this film. Other than some interesting genre set pieces, some fun action, it's an absolute failure of a sequel, based on what the original did and the promise that it offered to potential sequels to mine it for. This could have been truly epic.
What a wasted opportunity. The major lesson to learn is that stories, great ones, are always centered in character. Robocop 2 forgets about the humanity of Murphy and instead focuses, like OCP, on the commercial profitability of the genre set pieces that Robocop offers. Hopefully the filmmakers of the remake have done their homework and come up with the same conclusions. That the questions to ask are, who is the main character? What does he or she want? Why do they care? What are the stakes? And most importantly, is there a three-dimensional, well-thought-through opponent for the main character to battle against? So what do you think about the ideas discussed here? Please share your thoughts in the comments section. There's just one more movie to go in our trilogy review, but its robo-crappiness goes beyond even that of part 2. Given the 2-hour torture that we just went through, let's take a little bit of a break before we take on part 3. July 1st sounds like the right amount of time. Let's meet back then when we'll complete our movie night in-depth analysis of the Robocop movies. Until then, let's remember that StoryCorp gives us more of what we pay for, so let's choose our movies wisely. And as always, long live good movies.